Americans beware, a warning from the Great White North as your Senate grows suspect of our Syrian refugee program. And monster mosquitoes. Germ guy Jason Tetro is on the hunt to caution Canadians over the Zika outbreak at our doorstep. And you won't believe one German mayor's response to concerns over children being sexually harassed by migrants. I'm Faith Goldie and you're watching On the Hunt.
Do you not have an answer for them, Justin? There is no left and right on this one. There is, however, right and wrong.
Canadians are always dreaming up ways to ruin our lives. The metric system, for the love of John.
Captain Kirk of the USS Enterprise. Canadian.
Do not panic! I'm in complete control!
Welcome to Canada.
I'm your worst nightmare.
I don't know what you're talking about.
We got ways of making you pronounce the letter O.
What we have here is a brave but misguided group of Americans who've gone right into Canada and kicked some serious Canadian butt.
Our border. That thin line which guards the midsection of North America, that separates football and better Netflix from hockey and Ryan Gosling's hometown. The longest international boundary in the world, historically defended, barely policed. A fact so widely accepted that it served as the comedic setting in that movie, Canadian Bacon, which satirized rising tensions between we neighbors. Yeah, it's too bad there's a lot less to laugh about now. Sure, we're not as bad as the guns and drugs and illegal smugglers to the south of you, but boy, Prime Minister Trudeau's Syrian refugee plan sure has you worried. I mean, I don't blame you, especially with the whole ISIS bragging about smuggling covert gunmen into Western nations disguised as refugees thing. Yeah, that. It's no wonder your Senate's Homeland Security Committee is calling our ambassador and others to testify about our migrant fast-tracking and implications for your national security. Even if immigration minister over here referred to the hearings as, quote, political theater and chalked it up to a quote, a Tea Party operation. Yeah, well, we voting Canadians, we actually want answers too, just like you guys. So we want to make life a little easier for you Americans as you brood over these hearings. So we figured that we Canadians could provide you with a snapshot of what we do and don't know about our own refugee plan. All right, first things first, the questions we have, what we don't know, and sort of hope you can figure out for us. Yeah. We have no idea how many Syrian refugees are actually destined for our shores in total. Yeah, true story. When our new government was elected into power in October, they pledged to bring in 25,000. Now they're throwing around numbers as high as 35 and even 50,000 by year's end.
We will bring into this country 25,000 refugees, but then the target date is by the end of February. Now that'll be a mix. So that's 25,000 refugees, partly private, partly government. Through the rest of 2016, we will bring in more refugees. I cannot tell you how many, but I would not be surprised if that number was large.
Yeah, so giant question mark around the number. But what about the people behind the number? The Canadian government is telling us, i.e. media and opposition politicians, virtually nada about who these people actually are and how they're picked. Like, are these people mostly Christians, persecuted Muslims, targets of Assad's regime? How are they being prioritized? It would seem like a pretty simple question, right? And yet they're keeping us totally in the dark. They also won't tell us what type of questions they're asking refugee applicants. Like, hey, how do you feel about them non-niqab wearing Jewish lesbians? Because in Canada, those types of people, well, they're free to exist and say not be stoned or thrown off roofs. So we don't know the grand total or who these people are or what they're being asked to get into our country, which shares a massive border with you guys. But our government also won't tell us if there are any health concerns being raised during the screening process. Questions like, hey, can you pee in this cup over here to make sure you're not carrying Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome into our country? And when it comes to questions about security concerns, it's kind of like a top priority. Yeah, no dice on that too. We have no idea if they're asking them questions like, hey, how do you actually feel about ISIS? Because apparently 13% of you sympathize with them. And that's sort of worrying when you consider Canada's background checks on refugees are just a touch less rigorous than the 18 to 24-month vettings done by your authorities before letting any Syrian set foot on American soil. All right, that brings us to what we do know. At the time of taping this show, shy of 16,000 Syrian migrants have already arrived in Canada simply since November. By the time you watch this, that number will likely be much higher, as the Canadian government has promised to resettle at least 25,000 Syrians by March 1. We're told we're favoring women, children, and families. So there are a couple of questions as to whether or not our government pays any attention to the evolution of terrorist threats, say like the female shooter in San Bernardino, who was married with a kid, but I digress. At least 4 Canadian cities have already asked for a pause in the influx of refugees, as they're simply they're not equipped to handle them. For the record, I have been to 2 of those hotels housing refugees, and it ain't secure, it ain't pretty. Meanwhile, health agencies are warning of potential infectious disease outbreaks in said hotels, as they admittedly struggle to plan for the coming months. Also what we know, our Auditor General, he says if someone wanted to exploit the gaps in Canada's border safety system for the sake of criminal activity, it wouldn't be difficult to do. Meantime, our Border Services Agency missed its target for, quote, timely removal of failed refugee claimants, according to the latest departmental performance report. So here's where we are. Basically, we have more refugees than we can handle already in our country, some of which might get very sick, others who might be exploiting our system for criminal activity, and we can't even deport them in a timely fashion. Pretty comforting, eh? On a wider note here, neither U.S. Border Patrol nor other federal law enforcement agencies have ever actually stopped an Islamist terrorist coming across your southern border with Mexico. Whereas on multiple occasions, federal agents have stopped terror suspects crossing in, you guessed it, from Canada, including the Millennium Bomber, who drove off a ferry from Canada onto Washington's Olympic Peninsula with a trunk full of explosives. And between foiled plans like via rail passenger plot or successful terrorist strikes like the one in Quebec, the other one in Ottawa in just 2014, each of which claimed the life of a Canadian soldier in uniform, I think it's pretty fair to say Canada is anything but off jihadi radar. And so, U.S. Senate, on behalf of Canada, we hope your hearing renders real answers from our government, because it's about time they answer to someone. Stay with us. Germ guy Jason Tetro is on the hunt with all your answers to Zika virus questions.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta. Go to thedestroyers.ca to sign up for your free copy today.
We estimate that we'll need some $8.5 million to adequately help our member states to respond to this. We have not discussed the case of possible sexual transmission that was reported in Texas. I'm not sure that we have a formal report on this, and obviously it would bring a new dimension to the Zika problem, and that will be studied further.
Welcome back. Zika, the virus carried by some mosquitoes, is wreaking havoc on women carrying children. Linked to a neurological disorder which causes babies to be born with abnormally small heads, global health agents are now calling for an international response to the outbreak. Let's take a look at the bullet points. The World Health Organization is now declaring that the Zika outbreak is a, quote, public health emergency. The alert, which the international body has taken only 3 times before, puts the mosquito-borne disease in the same category as Ebola. Now the WHO is warning Zika will spread to all but 2 countries in South, Central, and North America, the exceptions being Canada and Chile. Meantime, more than 30 Americans have been diagnosed after traveling to the affected regions, while the Center for Disease Control is confirming that the first case of U.S. transmission, wait for it, via sexual contact. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Here in Canada, one pregnant Toronto woman who was refused the Zika test after travels to Brazil said she's now considering abortion. The Ontario government is, of course, stepping in. Joining us now is the Germ Guy, author of The Germ Code and his latest book, The Germ Files, Jason Tetro. So good to have you here, Jason. I would say
it's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you are really one of the country's top experts when it comes to germs, obviously. And I love coming to you to get a little bit of a scoop of what's happening for us laity and what we should know about it. So Health Canada is telling especially pregnant women not to travel to the affected areas. How concerned should we be as Canadians when it comes to the Zika virus?
Well, if you're not traveling to any of the affected areas, then there's nothing to worry about. The mosquito that causes or harbors Zika just simply is not here. And I know that a lot of people have been concerned about, well, maybe it'll transfer to other mosquitoes. But they tried that back in the 1950s, surprise, surprise, in the Zika forest. And it was only in 2 different species. And surprise, it's still in those 2 species. So I don't think we need to worry about it coming to Canada. If you are traveling, you are, you shouldn't be getting bit by a mosquito in the first place, because not only is there Zika, there's, dengue fever, there's the potential for malaria in some places. So, these things are disease carriers everywhere you're going to go. I think right now, because there is so much concern about women becoming infected in the first and second trimester, leading to the Zika virus causing this microcephaly, I can see that there's a concern there. But remember, the virus is only going to be inside of you for about 21 days, and it's going to take another 7 days for it for the immune system to sort of calm down. So 28 days in total. After that, you're going to have immunity, and then eventually you'll be able to get pregnant. So 18 months, as we've heard before, probably not necessary. But if you are going to these regions and you've come back, wait a month. Even if you don't exhibit symptoms, you may still have the virus, but after that point, you should be fine.
Now, with this news of the first case in the U.S. of it being sexually transmitted, same goes there, 1 month in your system? Or, I mean, this, for a lot of folks at home, is a total wild card. We thought it was just about the mosquitoes. Now you can get it through sexual contact?
Oh, no, I've been talking about the sexual contact for a while. We've known about it for almost 5 years in the scientific world. This is what they call the first confirmed case. And what that simply means is now the media can say it, and so can all the public health officials, when before they really couldn't. It was just speculated. As for the virus actually being inside somebody, I think in the women, it's still going to be that 21 to 28 days. But in men, there's a little interesting thing that goes on in the scrotum area. Sorry, it's true.
It's okay,
called
don't worry, you
immune
can say those
privilege.
words.
And what it means is you don't actually get as strong of immune response there. And as a result, viruses can hang out and, they can stick around for much longer. Now, we don't have numbers on Zika, but its very close cousin, dengue fever, also in the 1950s was looked at. And what they found was that in our cousins, apes, the virus could hang around for almost 3 months. It was about 77 days, I think, is what they came up with the average. So if you're a man and you have the Zika virus, then it's probably best to have, to wrap it up, if you will, for at least 3 months after you've been to these locations.
Wow. Okay, so that changes things a little bit more. I mean, 3 times the length that it'll stay in your system. Last 2 questions here. Summer Olympics 2016, Rio de Janeiro, of course, Brazil being the hardest hit country. Are you worried about people traveling? I mean, there are going to be hordes of people from countries all over the world traveling to hard hit Zika epicenter, Brazil, and then taking this virus, perhaps even the mosquitoes, back home to their local populations?
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually been telling people to make sure they check their suitcases if they're there so there's no mosquitoes. The problem with this particular virus is that once you've been bitten by a mosquito, it may take 10 days before you even realize you have the infection. So this is why we're seeing, an increasing number of people who have traveled and come back and have the virus. In Canada, I'm not so concerned about this because, again, we don't have the mosquitoes. But I was just seeing a report now that said that after the Olympics, Spain could end up having a ravaging wave of this particular virus. Now, am I overly concerned? No, not like the WHO. I mean, they called that public health emergency as a post-Ebola reactionary move. Because I don't know if you know this, but remember in 2002, 2003, we had the West Nile virus?
Right.
Yeah. Well, that not only sent people to hospital with neurological problems, it actually killed people. And surprise, surprise, it caused microcephaly as well. And yet, for some reason, it wasn't called a public health emergency back then. And yet, it was probably a much more dangerous virus than Zika. So you have to take all of this into perspective that there are still many more dangerous viruses out there. But at the moment, because of what we've seen in Brazil and because there are so many unanswered questions, basically because we didn't think Zika was going to be that big of a problem, there's going to be a few more questions than answers, and maybe that should leave you a little bit more concerned. And if that's the case, look it up in whether it be the CDC guidelines, the Health Canada guidelines. You're going to be able to find the information that's there. And if at all worst, you can find me on Twitter at @JATetro, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
That's fantastic. You answered my next question, which was where can folks find you? I have to be honest with you, Jason. When I cross over from this world into the next, I think one of my first questions would be, God, why this useless and vile animal, this mosquito between dengue and West Nile and, pardon?
Me or mosquitoes?
No, the mosquitoes, not you, Jason. Jason, you've been awesome. We're so blessed to have you. And thanks very much for your time today.
It was such a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. More of On the Hunt on the other side of this break.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know the Rebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to therebel.media/store to find out more.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back. Here are the top headlines we're tracking for you this week. In international news, Germany is preparing to house some 10,000 refugees in Berlin hotels at a cost of 600 million euros. And that has a few folks up in arms, as that city's homeless population is almost exactly 10,000 people. This as a former news boss in Germany has claimed that country's media is told what to report on by Chancellor Merkel's government. His admission comes as the country grapples with new accusations media ignored hundreds of sex attacks committed by migrants during Cologne's New Year's celebrations. Meantime, lawlessness in Sweden as one asylum center has seen a spike in rapes, including of one 10-year-old boy. Home to 600 refugees, only 2 staff members monitored the grounds as police now refuse to enter. And in France now, high schools are banding together, saying students should be allowed to smoke on school grounds so that they don't become targets for extremists while they gather for cigarette breaks on the streets outside. And in the U.S., President Barack Obama reached out to Muslims in his first official visit to a mosque as president. Denouncing anti-Muslim bias, Obama, well, he got down to the heart of the matter, saying Muslims don't hear thank you enough, and that, quote, television shows should have some Muslim characters that are unrelated to national security. And closer to home, a headline not from The Onion, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau objects to the use of the term taxpayer to describe Canadian citizens. Now, unless you say service receivers at the same time as you say taxpayers, the PM said, you're only giving half the equation. And who better to lecture us on half the equation math than a man withdrawing in the fight against ISIS while trying to evacuate all their refugees. And some good news out of New Brunswick. Mount Allison University will stop funding the Women and Gender Studies program in the 2016-17 academic year. As someone required to take gender perspective classes as part of my own history degree at the University of Toronto, I wish students there well as they return to a study of facts, not feelings. And don't touch that keyboard. When we return, a clip from one German mayor will have you yelling at your screen. Stay with us.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to therebel.media/themegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out.
Welcome back. Now, before we let you go, we want you to check out this one clip of a ruckus municipal council meeting in Bad Schlemme, Germany, which ended in residents demanding that the mayor step down over his comments. Just look at what he told one man concerned about sexual harassment of his grandchildren by migrants.
Ich hatte meine Frau in der Schule. Sportunterricht in Doppelreise. Meine Enkeltochter in der 10. Klasse. Es ist schon mehrfach vorgekommen. Ja, das stimmt. Dass die von den Kindern also dann von Fenster aus angebügelt werden und solche Sachen. Wie war das belegt, wenn es Sommer ist? Wenn die Mädchen etwas leichter bekleidet sind. Ist das irgendeine
Ganz einfach, indem wir dort nicht provozieren und dort nicht entlang fällt.
In sein eigenes Land! In seine eigene Stadt darf man nicht mehr! Ah, Junge! In seine eigene Stadt! In seine eigene Stadt darf man nicht mehr gehen! Geh bloß nach Hause, Junge! Wer hat dich denn gewählt? Die kommen hierher und wir dürfen nicht mehr lang gehen. Junge, 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 du haust Dinger raus hier. Du hast ja nicht mal mehr Ausreden. Meine Enkel sollen ja zur Schule gehen.
Wir hatten jetzt erst
So ist es ja.
You can't really blame the residents for getting upset as they did. I mean, can you imagine this happening on the streets of your own town? This don't provoke them victim-blaming PCBS seems to be on the rise in Germany. It wasn't so long ago that the German Interior Minister asserted that conservatives who criticized the wave of migrants flooding into the country were, quote, just as awful as the migrants who sexually molested women in Cologne. And who could forget Cologne's mayor, who said that the solution to migrant sex attacks is a female code of conduct, where women ought to stay at an arm's length from strange men. I'm not sure when political correctness changed from a will not to offend any group of people to a license to attack native populations. But when this tyrannical social disease with manners begins to blame children for being victims of sexual harassment, well, everyone should be offended. That's it for this week. Until next Thursday, God bless. And remember, we've got your six.